6,700 images in 2 days. Picture this. It's the last week of December 2025. The holidays are winding down. People are posting family photos, vacation snaps, Christmas selfies on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter. But something else is happening too. Quietly, almost invisibly, Elon Musk's AI company, xAI, has just pushed a new update to its chatbot, Grok, a shiny new image editing feature. The kind of thing that, on paper, sounds pretty cool. Upload a photo, let AI transform it, change the background, the lighting, the vibe. But here's the thing about move fast and break things. Sometimes what breaks is trust. Within days, not weeks, not months, users started exploiting that feature. They were uploading photos of real women, real girls, and Grok was undressing them, generating hyperrealistic, sexualized, deepfake images of people who never consented to any of it. And then, researchers at a Paris nonprofit called AI Forensics started counting. Between January 5th and 6th, 2026 alone, that's one single day, they estimated at least 6,700 sexual images were generated through Grok's tool. 6,700 in 24 hours. In some of those images, regulators said they depicted minors in ways that constituted child sexual abuse material. That's when Europe's patience ran out. Meet the regulators Elon can't just tweet his way out of. Before we go further, let's set the stage, because you need to understand who is actually coming for Grok. Because this isn't just one angry bureaucrat in Brussels. This is an entire architecture of regulatory power that has been quietly, methodically, deliberately constructed over the last decade. Think of it as a three-layer cake. Layer 1, the Digital Services Act, the DSA. This is Europe's big rulebook for the internet, and it went fully into force in 2024. If you run a platform with more than 45 million users in the EU, you're what they call a very large online platform. You play by their rules. You do risk assessments. You moderate harmful content. You open your algorithm to researchers. You comply. Or you face fines of up to 6% of your global annual revenue. X, formerly Twitter, is on that list. Layer 2, the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. You've seen those cookie pop-ups on every website? Yeah, that's the GDPR's fault. And it applies to how companies handle personal data. Faces, voices, images of real people. All of that is personal data. And Ireland's Data Protection Commission, the DPC, is the lead enforcer for the EU because X's European headquarters? Dublin, Ireland. That's their turf. Layer 3, the AI Act, the world's first comprehensive law specifically targeting artificial intelligence. It categorizes AI systems by risk level. At the top, prohibited practices, things that are simply banned. No questions asked. And notification tools that enable gender-based violence? That's increasingly looking like it belongs in that category. And the fines under the AI Act? Up to 35 million euros or 7% of global turnover, whichever is higher. So when Europe says it's coming after Elon's AI, it's not a press release. It's not a tweet. It's a legal framework backed by billion-dollar penalties. Let that sink in. How one feature became a 5-alarm fire. Let's walk through this thing, step by step, because the speed of the escalation is genuinely remarkable. Late December 2025, xAI quietly rolls out the new Grok image editing feature. The spicy mode, some called it. No major announcement, no proactive risk review, or at least not one that satisfied regulators. January 5th to 6th, 2026, AI Forensics publishes their numbers. 6,700 sexualized images in a single day. European Commission spokesperson Thomas Renier goes on record. The content is appalling and clearly illegal. Quote, "It has no place in Europe." January 8th, 2026, the Commission exercises one of the most powerful tools it has under the DSA. It issues a retention order. X must preserve all internal documents and data related to Grok until the end of 2026. Every email, every Slack message, every internal memo about that feature, locked, frozen, ready for investigators. January 12, 2026, Ofcom, Britain's media regulator, opens a formal investigation into X under the Online Safety Act. Quote, "We have decided to open a formal investigation to establish whether X has failed to comply with its legal obligations." January 14, 2026, a mobile billboard is rolling through the streets of Westminster, past the Houses of Parliament, urging Prime Minister Keir Starmer to ban X and Grok entirely. The corporate accountability group ICO is paying for it. This is not a fringe thing anymore. January 15, 2026, Musk announces restrictions on Grok inside X. But here's the catch. The restrictions only apply within the X platform. The standalone Grok app, full functionality. Researchers also quickly discover that even the X restrictions can be bypassed. The Commission? Not impressed. January 26, 2026, the European Commission makes it official. Formal infringement proceedings under the Digital Services Act. This is the big one. Now investigators can demand internal data, conduct on-site inspections, and impose interim measures, including potentially suspending Grok's image generation features within the EU entirely while the case plays out. February 3, 2026, the UK's Information Commissioner's Office opens its own formal investigation into XAI specifically, looking at whether personal data was processed unlawfully under UK GDPR. February 17, 2026, Ireland's DPC, the lead EU data watchdog, launches what it calls a large-scale inquiry into X. They're examining whether X complied with its fundamental obligations under GDPR. Deputy Commissioner Graham Doyle puts it plainly, they've been engaged with X since the media reports first emerged. All of this in less than 7 weeks. What it actually costs to lose to Europe, here's where this gets really interesting. Because Elon Musk is the world's richest man, right? He's got Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, Boring Company, XAI. He's not exactly sweating some regulator in Dublin. Or is he? Let's talk money. In December 2025, before the Grok deepfake crisis even exploded, the European Commission already hit X with a $120 million fine, the first ever fine under the Digital Services Act. It was about X's blue check verification system and its advertising policy not meeting EU transparency standards. $120 million. And that was a warm-up. Under the DSA, the maximum fine is 6% of global annual revenue. For X, that's potentially in the hundreds of millions. Under the AI Act, if Grok's notification features are classified as a prohibited practice under Article 5, which talks specifically about systems that enable harms like gender-based violence, the maximum fine jumps to $35 million or 7% of global turnover, whichever is higher. And then there's the UK, running its own parallel track. Ofcom under the Online Safety Act, the ICO under UK GDPR. Those fines cap at 4% of annual worldwide turnover. And Spain's government ordered prosecutors to investigate X, Meta, and TikTok over distribution of AI-generated child sexual abuse material. France, its own national investigation. Germany, national investigation. Malaysia and Indonesia, they just blocked Grok entirely. No fine, no negotiation, just gone. This is what a coordinated global pile-on looks like when it's not even coordinated. It's just the natural consequence of building a product that generates illegal content and then defending it poorly. This isn't really about Grok. It's about who gets to set the rules. Okay, step back, take a breath, because here's the thing. The Grok deepfake crisis is the trigger, but it's not the cause of this collision. The cause is something much bigger, much older, and much more philosophically fundamental. It's about two completely different visions of what the internet is for. On one side, you have Silicon Valley. Move fast, break things, ship features, let the market sort it out, ask for forgiveness, not permission. And look, that philosophy produced extraordinary things. The smartphone, social media, cloud computing, large language models, the pace of innovation that America has led for 30 years. And on the other side, you have Europe, where the default assumption is not innovate first, regulate later, but what are the harms, and how do we prevent them before they happen? GDPR didn't come from nowhere. It came from a continent that remembers what happens when governments and corporations get unlimited access to personal data about citizens. The history is not abstract. These two worldviews have been on a collision course for years, and Elon Musk, who has never exactly been shy about his contempt for regulation, is now the most visible, most polarizing face of that collision. In December 2025, he publicly called for the EU to be dismantled. He said the organization had become a weapon against its own people. He's been supportive of far-right movements across Germany, France, and the UK. Movements that are, not coincidentally, also hostile to Brussels. So when Europe goes after Grok, there are people on both sides of this debate who think this is personal. And maybe it is, but the legal framework is not. The most ambitious attempt to tame AI in human history. Let's zoom out one more time, because we need to talk about the UAI Act and why it matters so much beyond just this one case. The AI Act is genuinely the most comprehensive attempt any government has ever made to regulate artificial intelligence. It was years in the making, passed by the European Parliament, and it works on a tiered risk system. At the bottom, minimal risk AI. Think spam filters, video game AI. Fine, go ahead. Moving up, limited risk. Some transparency requirements. You have to tell people they're talking to a chatbot. Then, high-risk AI. This covers things like AI used in hiring, credit scoring, medical devices, critical infrastructure, heavy documentation requirements, third-party audits, human oversight, and at the very top, prohibited AI. Systems that pose an unacceptable risk to fundamental rights, biometric surveillance in public spaces, social scoring, AI that exploits psychological vulnerabilities, and increasingly, if the European Parliament has its way, notification tools. Tools that use AI to generate non-consensual intimate imagery. A specific clause is currently being negotiated in what they call the Digital Omnibus legislation, which would explicitly add these tools to the prohibited list, a direct legislative response written into law to what Grok did. Here's what's wild about the AI Act's enforcement structure. It's not just about the product, it's about the process. Did your company conduct a risk assessment before launching this feature in Europe? Did you implement adequate safeguards? Did you have a human review process? Can you prove it? The EU doesn't necessarily need to prove Grok is harmful in every case. They need to prove that X did not follow the required process. And based on what the Commission has already said publicly, that there is reason to believe that X did not conduct a provisional risk assessment when launching the Grok feature in Europe, that case may already be half-built. Oh, and one more thing. Remember in July 2025 when XAI signed the EU's Voluntary AI Code of Practice? Smart move on paper. But they only signed up for the safety and security chapter. They opted out of the transparency and copyright chapters entirely, and that partial compliance strategy? It drew immediate scrutiny from the EU AI office. It looked less like genuine commitment and more like legal maneuvering, the minimum necessary to say we signed without actually being held to the full standard. In Europe's regulatory world, that kind of move does not go unnoticed. Tech wars, trade wars, and why this is bigger than one chatbotlet. Let me tell you something that doesn't get said enough in these conversations. The fight over Grok is not just about deepfakes. It's not even just about AI safety. It's about geopolitical power in the digital age. Think about it this way. The United States currently dominates AI. OpenAI, Google DeepMind, Anthropic, Meta AI, XAI. The most powerful models in the world are American. The compute infrastructure, the data centers, the chips, largely American or American allied. Europe has almost none of that. It doesn't have a homegrown foundation model that can compete. It doesn't have the venture capital ecosystem. It doesn't have the chip manufacturers. What it does have, what it has deliberately, methodically built, is regulatory leverage. The ability to say, if you want to operate in the largest single market in the world, with 450 million consumers and some of the highest per capita spending power on Earth, you play by our rules. That is Europe's card. And the GDPR proved they would play it. They fined Meta, they fined Google, they fined Amazon, they didn't blink. Now add to this the political dimension. Elon Musk in 2025 and 2026 is not just a tech CEO. He's arguably one of the most politically powerful private citizens in the world. He's the head of Doge. He has the ear of the American president. He has 200 million followers. He amplifies right-wing politicians across Europe. He calls European institutions illegitimate. For European regulators, going after Grok isn't just enforcing tech law. It is, in some ways, a statement, a signal. You are not above the law here. No one is. And here's the counter-argument, the one you'll hear from Musk's defenders, and it's worth taking seriously. Europe's aggressive regulation is exactly why it can't build AI companies. The GDPR made it almost impossible to train large language models on European data. The compliance costs are enormous. The regulatory uncertainty makes investors nervous. By over-regulating, Europe is guaranteeing that it will always be dependent on American AI. And then, complaining about American AI. It's a real critique. It has merit. But, and this is important, that debate is separate from the question of whether it's okay for an AI tool to generate child sexual abuse material. Those are two different conversations, and conflating them is a rhetorical move, not an argument. The outcomes that actually matter, so where does this go? Honestly, a few different directions, and they're not mutually exclusive. Scenario 1, the settlement. X and the European Commission negotiate. X agrees to implement stricter content moderation, conduct the required risk assessments, open its algorithms to EU researchers, and pay a significant but not company-threatening fine. Both sides declare partial victory. This is the most likely near-term outcome with the DISA proceedings. Scenario 2. The landmark fine. The Commission completes its investigation, finds X in violation of the DSA and/or the AI Act, and issues a maximum fine. If that's 6% of global revenue plus 7% of global turnover under two separate instruments, you're potentially looking at a number that actually hurts. This would set a precedent for every other AI company operating in Europe. Scenario 3. The ban. This sounds dramatic, but it's not hypothetical. Malaysia and Indonesia already did it. If Grok is found to be generating prohibited content and X doesn't adequately fix it, the Commission does have the power to require its suspension within the EU. Under DISA interim measures, that would be the nuclear option. But it's on the table. Scenario 4. The legislation. Europe doesn't just regulate this case, it writes the specific behavior out of existence across the board. The Digital Omnibus proposal to explicitly ban AI notification tools as a prohibited practice under the AI Act would make this not about X's compliance failures, but about a category of product being illegal in Europe full stop. No matter who builds it, and whatever happens in the courts and the Commission chambers, something has already shifted. Because this case, Grok, January 2026, the deepfakes, the probes, the fines, the billboards rolling past Parliament, this case has forced a public reckoning about a question we'd been quietly avoiding. When an AI model makes it trivially easy to generate sexualized images of real people without their consent, when thousands of those images can be created in a single day, who is responsible? Is it the users who prompted it? Is it the platform that deployed it without adequate safeguards? Is it the AI company that built the model? Is it the regulator who didn't act fast enough? Or is it all of us for building a culture that moved so fast, so thoughtlessly, that we didn't stop to ask what we were actually building toward? What does it mean to be responsible? Here's the thing about Elon Musk, and I mean this without snark. Genuinely, the man has a coherent worldview. He believes in maximal freedom. He believes in rapid iteration. He believes that the cure for bad speech is more speech, that the cure for harmful technology is better technology, that regulators slow down progress and ultimately make the world worse. And there's a version of that worldview that's noble. That produced SpaceX, which is genuinely one of the most remarkable engineering achievements in human history. That produced Tesla, which, whatever you think of the company or the man, accelerated the transition to electric vehicles by years, if not decades. But there is a difference between moving fast on rocket engines and moving fast on AI that generates images of children. There is a difference between breaking norms in aerospace and breaking norms in content that harms real, identifiable people. The move fast philosophy works when the externalities are acceptable or fixable. It does not work when the externalities are images of child sexual abuse that spread across the internet in the time it takes you to read this sentence. And Europe, whatever its regulatory overreach, whatever its innovation deficit, whatever legitimate criticisms you want to level at Brussels, Europe at least has a framework that tries to ask that question before the harm happens. Not always successfully, not always coherently, but trying. That's the fundamental tension here. Not Elon versus the U, not America versus Europe, not innovation versus stagnation. It's the question of who bears the cost of being wrong. In Silicon Valley's model, the cost of being wrong is paid by the people harmed by the product. The company iterates, learns, does better next time. In Europe's model, the cost of being wrong is supposed to be paid by the company in advance, in the form of compliance. Neither model is perfect, but when the thing that goes wrong is 6,700 sexualized images in 24 hours, some of them of children, you have to ask yourself which kind of wrong is more acceptable. A fight that's just getting started. Here's where we are. As of right now, in June 2026, the European Commission's formal proceedings under the Digital Services Act are ongoing. Ireland's Data Protection Commission large-scale GDPR inquiry, ongoing. The UK's Ofcom investigation, ongoing. The UK's ICO investigation into XAI, ongoing. Spain's prosecutorial probe, ongoing. France and Germany's national investigations, ongoing. The UAI Act's transparency rules for AI-generated content were supposed to kick in August 2026, but the Commission has proposed delaying them to 2027 as part of a broader push to be seen as less hostile to innovation. X has already been fined $120 million under the TSA for issues that had nothing to do with Grok, and the digital omnibus legislation that would explicitly ban notification AI tools as a prohibited practice, still in negotiation, still being drafted, But moving. The story of Europe coming after Elon's AI is not finished. It probably won't be finished for years. The legal processes are slow. The appeals will come. The lobbying is already happening. But something fundamental has already happened that can't be undone. The EU has demonstrated, to Musk, to every AI company watching, to every Silicon Valley startup planning their European expansion, that the Digital Services Act has teeth, that the AI Act is not a paper tiger, that when a product generates illegal content at scale, there are consequences, real ones, financial ones, operational ones, and the next company thinking about shipping a feature without a risk assessment, without considering what happens when it's abused, is going to have to think about that. That's not nothing. The internet has spent 30 years operating on the assumption that technology is neutral, that platforms are just pipes, that the code doesn't have a point of view, that we're just a platform is a complete moral defense. Europe, clunkily, imperfectly, sometimes overreachingly, is arguing something different. It's arguing that if you build a tool powerful enough to harm millions of people, then you are responsible for how it's used. And if you won't take that responsibility seriously, then someone else will take it for you. You can agree with that. You can disagree with it. But you can't ignore it anymore. That's the story of why Europe is coming after Elon's AI. If you want to go deeper on the EU AI Act, on XAI's regulatory challenges, or on what this fight means for the future of artificial intelligence, it's all linked in the description. And if you watched this whole thing, genuinely, thank you. This stuff matters more than the headlines usually tell you. See you next time.